Thank you for joining me today on my channel as we take a look at how to organize your stuff for an extended campcraft, looking at a historical source and from my personal experience. Stay with me. So I'd like to thank you again for checking out my video, spending the time with me. Do me a favor, click the subscribe button now, and don't forget about the bell button. That way when these videos come out, you get notified when they come out, and it helps the channel grow. I really appreciate it. I have a goal of trying to get 1,000 subscribers by the end of summer of 2022, and you can be a part of that and help me on that journey. Again, click the subscribe button now and help us out. Appreciate it. I also want to throw out some names out there, do a shout out, if you will, to say thank you. Kent Vining is a gentleman who I never knew before until I started my living history impression of early campcraft. And I joined several Facebook groups to kind of pick the brains, but also learn and see what other people have done, just to get a clearer picture. No need to reinvent the wheel, if you will. Kent Vining started a Facebook group, I have no idea how long ago. The group is called Bannerman's Camp Classic and Vintage Motor Camping Living History. And on there, he's been kind of my long distance mentor, if you will. If I have a question about something, he's always one of the first ones to answer. He also shares a lot of stuff on that page that I find very valuable and very interesting. He collects vintage and old camp gear, and the guy knows his stuff. So if you're interested in this historical thing, that would be a Facebook group I would suggest you do. The people on there are really helpful. They're very welcoming. Even if you just want to kind of lurk in the corners and maybe just read up on what people have already shared, it's a great learning experience. It's a lot of fun. The second group I want to suggest is Amalgamated Order of Motor Campers. That's another group that throws out primary sources all the time. I see pictures posted all the time. It's really great for this historical campcraft stuff, so check them out as well. Now, I have recently started a webpage called honorableoutfitters.com. Again, that's honorableoutfitters.com, and it is going to be my repository of my research for the different things that I show. There's just so much minutia and detail, I just can't put in a YouTube video. There's just not enough time. I mean, not everybody has more than a half hour in these videos. Tend to last about a half hour. So if you're interested in the minutia and the history, and you want to see more pictures, close-up pictures, more detailed stuff, then go on there, honorableoutfitters.com, subscribe on there, that way you get notified of when I write my articles. And eventually I hope that website expands into other things that I want down the road, my goal, if you will, long term. So check that out, honorableoutfitters.com. Okay, so I'm going to frame this discussion, like I said, in a deer camp setting. Now, historically speaking, which is what this is about, right? In the early 1900s, late 1800s, vacationing and taking time away for hunting was a pretty commonplace thing if you had the money, if you're middle class, upper middle class, or wealthy. Generally, when you went on a vacation, you went vacation for long periods of time. A week is usually a shorter vacation. So you'd go out for a couple weeks or several weeks at a time, or even months if you had the money. It was a big deal. That was kind of a thing. During the time period that this focuses on is kind of the transition between the Gilded Age, the Roaring Twenties, and the Great Depression. All right, so the gap of wealth and poverty was extreme. People that did have money, they tend to have a lot of it, and that's where they go out for these extended periods of time. Here in Ohio, when it comes to hunting, deer were not that common. It's very different from here in Ohio today. Now you can't drive on a highway anywhere without seeing some type of roadkill, of a deer. It just doesn't happen. But in the early 1900s, late 1800s, deer were a rarity. If you saw a deer, that was like a newspaper-worthy event. Like everybody was talking about it. Literally got a newspaper sometimes. So it was a big deal to see a deer here in Ohio. So what that means is for my fellow Ohioans and people in states that surrounding Ohio with similar circumstances, they had to travel outside of their state to hunt big game like deer, elk, moose, antelope, things like that. So when they do it, again, they do it for extended periods of time. Okay, so with that, that's where deer camp really gets its start. Having that longer time besides just opening day of deer season or maybe a weekend. And it was a social event. You would have clubs, shooting clubs, sporting clubs that would get together, but you would also have family that would get together and go out for those extended hunts in periods of time. So it was a celebration in a way of people's time and how they spent it. So you wanted to make sure that you enjoyed it. This isn't something you're going to do to push yourself to the test for proving that you can rough it. Horace Kephart even said the whole point of learning outdoor skills and campcraft skills is not necessarily to rough it, but to smooth it. With our time is valuable. Personally, I get to go out 6 or 7 times a year, and that's not as much as I'd like, but that's certainly more than I'd say the majority of people who live in the United States. Now, granted, maybe the majority of people don't like camping, but I don't get to go out as much as I would like. I tend to have most of that camping time with my son's scout pack and my son's scout troop and living history and reenactments. So when I do get to go out, those weekends come up, the golden hour, if you will, it's really important that I get it right, that I'm prepared and I nail it. So the things that I tend to pack and I prepare, they're regimented. I have a routine. And routine harkens back to Horace Kephart's idea of in the winter months you're preparing, you're mending your gear and you're taking care of things, you're taking stock. That way, when you do get to go out, you're ready to go. Okay? So how are you going to take all this stuff? Now, generally, I take a backpack. In all truthfulness, if I'm going out for a weekend, I just take my backpack and I'm good to go. Now, it's not as convenient as taking a box. Even though I'm pretty organized with my backpacks, with all the poke sacks, which I did a video of, you should check that out after this one, or other containers, small containers, having a backpack, and no matter how organized that you are, in an emergency, it can be kind of fumblesome. Or maybe you're just really cold or you're really hungry. Fumbling around in a backpack is not as convenient as being able to go to a box that's well organized. Backpacks also have the prone ability to get wet. Now we have dry sacks today. We had various materials to keep things dry in bags, even historically speaking, but there's only so much you can do. Okay, boxes have a better resistance to moisture, to rain, the multi-purpose, multi-use aspect of it, which when you go camping, when you pack something away, you should try to get in your mind, well, how else can I use this besides just what its initial intent should be to help you save weight and not pack unnecessary things. Horace Kephart suggested when you go on these deer camps and these extended camps that you take a steamer trunk. Again, that's that whole early 1900s, late 1800s vacation mentality. Steamer trunks were huge. Now he said get a light one, but even a light steamer trunk is pretty big. Some of those steamer trunks, they have drawers, they have shelves, they have all sorts of things and knickknacks for you to put things. So the steamer trunk, I think, is a little bit overkill. And I think even Horace Kephart said that it was overkill for the most part, unless you have a very short distance. If your car is not that far from a road and you're not going to get stuck in the mud, then the steamer trunk, sure, go for it. During a summer camp that I go with my scouts, I tend to take a trunk. All right, it makes sense. You're out there for a week, you want some luxuries, some things that's going to make you comfortable. Okay. Horace Kephart also suggested just taking what we call a duffel bag, big duffel bag. Again, the problem is everything's just jammed in there. You got to root around for it. So a box, I think, is the most practical thing if you're not going long distances and if you're going to be staying for a while. My box I like to use for a seat. My box I sometimes use as a makeshift table, if you will. It has that dual purpose. And anything that you put in a box or you take with you on a camping trip, you should try to get used to thinking, how else can I use this? What's another application for this? Even a simple thing like wool socks. Obviously wool socks are for your feet, but if your hands are cold, wool socks will do just fine as makeshift mittens. Getting that mentality and getting used to that thinking will help you down the road, help you lessen the things that you really need to take, and help you enjoy your time outdoors a little bit more because you'll be prepared. I don't need to take that because I can use this for that same thing. It's fine to have redundancies. In fact, it's important to have some redundancies. But having tons and tons and tons of extra stuff that you never really use, that gets kind of a nuisance. All right? So Horace Kephart suggested the box should be 24 inches by 18 inches by 9 inches. The box that I have, that I'm going to show you, is very similar to size. And I've developed my gear over my lifetime, over all my experiences, to pretty much fit in this. I think Horace Kephart's box would actually be better than the box I have on a winter camp out. Not so much for a summer, but on a winter camp out, I think his box would be better for size. My box is 22 inches, which is 2 inches difference. It's 2 inches smaller, by 11 inches, which is 7 inches smaller than his, and by 10 inches, which is 1 inch larger than his. So overall, my box is smaller than Horace Kephart's box. And I'm going to point out some of the limitations of my box, whereas Horace Kephart's would have definitely been more of an advantage. And it's due to it being a social event, this hunting thing. You don't have to necessarily take everything yourself. For example, a deck of cards. There's no point for every person in the party to carry a deck of cards. So what I have in my box is very condensed to what I tend to use and need for my longer campouts. One thing I strongly suggest is a pair of socks for every day that you're going to be out, and 2 to 3 pairs of extra socks to take with you, because keeping your feet warm, keeping your feet dry, keeping your feet comfortable is going to be really important whenever you do any type of outdoor sport. That's your foundation, if you will. If you don't take care of your foundation, then everything else will crumble. You'll be miserable. You can be cold. You could get frostbite. It's just not good, okay? So having socks, believe it or not, is going to be my number one suggestion for you. Start with your foundation. Now, you might see some redundancies in this box for an emergency's sake. And I'll have other boxes that I'll show you later throughout this series, not today, but you'll see some of the things that'll pop up in other boxes. But this is just for my quick get to, I want to have right away, if I get separated from my other things, this box will be the core of what I really need. And if for some reason something happened to all my other gear, I could at least deal with getting to where I need to go, or dealing with a situation that I have with just the contents of this box. I also suggest that the box have dividers inside, be partitioned out so you can fit things nicely. Partitions are good. I opted for a shelf. I like having a shallow shelf where all my small little knickknacks can be that I can get to right away, and my bulkier items I fit in the bottom. The box he suggests has wooden handles for stability and stuff. I have rope handles. I like the comfort of rope handles, but I also cover them with leather grips. Having just plain rope handles is kind of a pain in the butt, especially in colder weather, because that rope tends to stiffen up. So having those leather coverings benefits you not only for the roughness of the rope, but also to make it a little bit more comfortable when grabbing stiff rope. Your box should also have what's called cleats, strips of board that are at least 1 inch thick that run on the bottom of it. So as it sits on the ground, not all of the bottom is going to absorb that moisture from the ground. Instead, it's just going to be your cleats. And if your cleats get damaged, you can replace them easily. It's no big deal. So having some wooden cleats or wooden feet on the bottom, just 2 strips, one on each side, is going to be a benefit to having a box outdoors. It's going to be sitting for a long period of time. Let's take a look at what I have and how I organize it. And adapt these things to your own personal taste. What Horace Kephart says, even in his book, is that you should take a box and adapt it to your needs. What works for him is not going to work for everybody. And the same thing for me. What I have developed for myself and what I like and what my needs are may not fit your needs. Maybe your first aid kit's bigger. I don't know. But having those type of considerations is important for you. Personalize whatever it is that you put into it. And then after taking it out time and time and time again, tweak it a little bit. Take something out that you don't necessarily need or use. Or maybe you found something else that can have that dual purpose that we want to strive for. Let's take a look. So just about everything that you're going to see in this box is something that I've talked about in my previous videos. Some I haven't hit on quite yet. I will eventually. But most of these things that you'll see I hit over this past summer. So again, check out those prior videos if you're interested in any of these things and how they were used and historically, where do they all fit into place. First thing that I think you'll see and you jump out is a knife. Now, I always carry a pocket knife, always carry a belt knife, but having a spare belt knife that's something that's going to stay at camp can be quite useful, just in case you ever lose your other one. This is a sharpening stone. We need to make sure we can maintain our tools. Now granted, and later on in this series, you're going to see my toolbox. In my toolbox, I'm also going to have various stones. But this is a small pocket stone that I can easily get to if I need to. I don't have to root around in my toolbox. I know exactly where this is, and it's something I can slip in my pocket if I'm just stepping out just outside of camp or something. Having 2 compasses can be extremely useful. You're going to wear one when you go out, but having another one back at camp, especially since these compasses, they were made with a glass crystal bezel, they're a little bit more prone to being damaged. So having an extra compass at camp, I think, is extremely important. Stays there. Same thing with pocket watches or another watch. I probably went through 5 or 6 different pocket watches in my time as a living historian and reenactor. So having 2 watches, one you carry on you and one that you keep in your box that also keeps time. This hasn't been wound yet. But having 2 watches will enable you just to be more prepared in case something happens. If you fall into a creek or something, the watch gets damaged, having another watch that you can rely on is going to be important. Musical instruments and entertainment. So I always take my harmonica, my jaw harp, and I usually take a deck of cards. In this I have a pair of dice, just so I can play Chuck-a-Luck and some other games with my fellow campers. When you're at camp, especially historically speaking, you tended to use natural fiber rope or twisted rope. So having a fid, I think, is readily handy. I like splicing and doing rope work. So having a fid that is custom made to my hand and use, I think, is pretty handy to have in this box. It's certainly not necessary. You can go out and you can carve your own fid. It's not that big of a deal to grab a stick, carve a point to it, and you're good to go. But having one that I've personally made for myself that fits and is graduated, ideally, I think that's valuable to me personally. Extra cordage. Now this is cotton rope. Now cotton rope I like having for a couple reasons. First of all, just like my trench lighter here, my rope lighter, if I run out of rope, I can turn to this rope and use it in the same way that I use my trench lighter. So if it's really windy, and in the winter when you don't have a lot of leaves on the trees, it can get really, really windy, and matches tend to go out. So having a trench lighter or rope that's already singed that you can light immediately and use that to start your fire is extremely important. And you should always have at least 3 different methods of making a fire, starting a fire. So flint and steel is certainly one. This type of lighter is one. Having a regular gas lighter and having matches, I think, are all very feasible and valuable to have. So you can also use this for your shoestring. You can use this for a string on a friction bow to start your fire. Just having some smaller cordage like this, it's about 1/4 of an inch, is really ideal for many applications. And I always carry more rope that's thicker, like 3/8 of an inch. But the smaller stuff, just having a little bit of it in case you need it, is really handy. So we talked about the trench lighter. Having a container of matches that is reserved only for emergencies is extremely important. If you have to dip into this set of matches, then you are in a tough spot and you really need to start thinking about heading home. So by the time you're using this, you've already used your trench lighter, you already used your rope and flint and steel and everything else, and this is going to be your last remaining chance of getting a fire going to help you stay warm and save your life. Top of that, we have 2 pieces of fat wood that can be shaved down and stripped down into pieces to start your fire. It's almost a guaranteed way of starting a fire in an emergency. A candle. Now, a candle is not only used for light. A candle, a paraffin candle like this one, can also be used to start a fire. You can also use the wax for your thread. Especially if you're doing canvas work, having wax thread is going to be very useful. So having wax and having a wax candle, I think, is still important, even in today of our contemporary times. Even if it's just a small nub, that's going to help you out a lot. Having a pencil that you can sharpen in the right width, having a writing implement. I never take a pen when I go camping. I always rely on my pencils because a pencil's never going to run out of ink. You're good to go as long as you keep sharpening it. A mirror. Now, I did a video already on how to signal with a mirror. So this is also a beauty item and a first aid item, an emergency preparedness item. So having a small mirror is very important. Having blanket pins, I think, are useful. You can use these to wrap a blanket around you to kind of make a makeshift sleeping bag, to repair something on a tent. So having larger blanket pins, I think, are invaluable. This is my flint and steel kit, and it also has my char cloth and some extra tinder. So immediately, again, I have another way of starting a fire. If things are wet, things are bad, I've got this to rely upon. And a small bag of emergency rations. This is rice. I think rice is really valuable over beans. Beans, I think, give you more calories. Beans are heartier, but the problem with beans, especially in the cold weather, is they have to soak for you to really digest them and digest them properly. Whereas rice, you can throw them in a pot of water, boil them up, and you've got yourself a nice, hot, quick meal. You can even sweeten it up with a little bit of sugar if you got some sugar or some other seasonings. It takes seasonings really well, and it digests easily. So this is a small bag of rice as my emergency ration. On the side here, this is my first aid kit. Sticking with the historical aspect of it is my older 1930s first aid kit. But as you can see, it's really shallow. And again, I can easily put things in, immediately organize them so that they're easy to get to. If I'm hungry, I know where my beans are. I don't have to fish around for them, especially important in the cold. These are all smaller items. Several of them are redundancies in case something happens to my primary that I keep on my person. Some of them are just my personal luxury items. I don't really need them. they make my trip that much enjoyable, much more enjoyable. Now we'll take out the tray. And again, these are redundancies. These are things that I already have on my person, but they can help me be more comfortable, or in an emergency, I can add them to what I already have. In the cold, snowy weather, you're going to get wet. So having things that are dry that you can come back to camp for and swap out for or add layers to is going to be really important. So I have a toboggan or a sock hat. Now, when I go to sleep, I always put on a sock hat in the cold wind months, especially since I'm bald. Having a toboggan can literally save your life. You lose so much heat from your head, your feet, and your circulation starts being pulled from your smaller digits, so your toes and your fingers. So those are the areas that you really need to focus on to make sure you don't lose heat. So we got our head, we've got our fingers. I like the leather gloves, especially being outdoors. Now leather has a tendency to absorb moisture, so this would be my backup pair that I would need if I'm working out on the woods. And my feet. So I have my wool socks. And I have two different types of wool socks here. One's historical, so it's like the rag wool. A modern consideration that I put in here, just as to offer a suggestion, are the battery-powered thermal wool socks that heat up. So having those, especially if you have circulation problems, can be quite useful. Always carry an extra piece of bandana. This, you can use as a towel. You can use it to wrap it around your head. You can use it as a filter. So many things. A first aid use. Use it as material for char cloth, etc. So bandana. This is my personal toiletry kit. And in it has a towel too, but it has your soap, your toothbrush, etc. Things like that. I have my small camping stove. So if I go somewhere and for some reason the fire is just not working out, I can light this thing up and I have a source of heat, but I also have a source of providing me warm food. In those cold winter months, you got to think about that. You got to think about your internal body temperature along with your external body temperature. Carry an extra pair of pants, an extra long sleeve shirt. This is a wool shirt. And an extra sweater. And I have a board here that I can use as a cutting board as needed. And I have a mess kit. So even if I'm outside of camp, if I'm going to go away, I can pack these smaller items away and have a means to cook for myself while I'm out in the blind or out in the deer stand. I have an old receipt by the looks of it. But in the situation of me being outside, I'm already going to have a sweater on. I'm already going to have a long sleeve shirt on. I'm certainly already going to have pants on. But if you get wet, if you get cold, you can either replace or add to. Now, Horace Kephart's box was bigger. So ideally, especially for a longer camp, I would have more socks than what I have in here. I'd have one pair of socks for every day that I'm going to be out, plus 2 or 3 extra socks. And I pack it away the same way every single time, which I almost didn't. I'm trying to think if I missed anything. And you do that, you get in the habit, and you practice it before you go out. That way, when it's needed, you already know where to go. Or you could even tell somebody in an emergency. Hey, go in my box. It's going to be on the left-hand side, bottom section. There you go. I hope you liked this video. I hope you found it useful, and it gives you some ideas of, how you might want to pack a box and things that you may want to take, or how you may want to organize it. Again, Horace Kephart suggested partitions in the bottom of the box. I like the shelf idea, but maybe you got another alternative. But the most important thing is you want to gather up all your stuff and fit the box to the stuff you want to take. Don't do the opposite. Don't force yourself to use a small box. If you do that, then you're going to run into the situation where you're going to be ill prepared. You don't want to be over prepared, but you don't want to be ill prepared. When you're starting out, it's so much better to be over prepared, tweak it little by little, than being under prepared. That's going to help you have an enjoyable time. That's going to help you stay warm, stay safe, stay comfortable, and just have fun. And that's what it's about. When you're outside, you want to put away all the worries and concerns of the world. That's your time to recharge, enjoy time with your friends and family, or maybe just yourself if you're a loner. I'm more of a social person. But you got to worry about your self-care, and that's the opportunity to do it. If you like this video, please click like. Leave me a story or a suggestion. Maybe you have some ideas for me on things that I might have missed, or things that you like to take that I didn't have listed in here. Maybe I can consider that for my own personal kit. I know Dave Canterbury, his 10 C's are really important. It's a great tool. If you're not familiar with Dave Canterbury, he is a great guy. Check out his channel, especially like Dave Canterbury's 10 C's. He pounds it out really well, and just going off of that will help you frame what's most important that you need to take. Okay. If you have those things covered, maybe with some other extra luxuries, then you're good to go. Go out and try it out, and try it in your backyard. Test everything at home before you obligate yourself out. Take one night, do it in your backyard. You might get the looks and the weird faces. You may have to hear to the screaming cats fighting or something. But spend the time testing out whatever you want to do in your backyard before you go out. I got a hammock. My son got a hammock for Christmas this year, and that's something that we've been wanting to get into, and never been hammocking before. So I told my boy, before we go on our big 20-mile trip, we're going to hammock in our backyard for a night or two, tweak things out, and maybe pick up some other things that we might need. That way we don't get caught off guard when we're actually out there in the middle of nowhere and we're kind of stuck. All right. So again, first, test out your stuff, gather it up in a bundle, build your box around what you want to take, not the other way around, and test it out. You do those things, you will be prepared, and you will have fun on whatever outing that you're going on. Hope you guys have a wonderful week. Don't forget to subscribe. Give a kiss and hug to your loved ones. And I'll catch you guys next week. Take care.